Okay, good morning everyone and welcome to Brennan IT's Microsoft Teams webinar series. This is webinar number 2, our Microsoft Teams Workspace Fundamentals. My name is Rebecca Apostolovsky. I'm the Product Marketing Manager here at Brennan IT and I'll be helping facilitate the webinar today. Just going to go through some housekeeping. So we've got the presentation is being recorded, so we will send this across to you as soon as the webinar is finished. The instructions for closed captioning is on the screen if you need to activate this on your side. Any questions will be answered throughout the session using the chat function. You can also ask questions anonymously. And for any of those questions that do require a demonstration, we've allowed some time at the end for this. So just going to quickly run through the agenda about the modern workplace, file storage applications, Microsoft Teams key features, team workspace structure, channel type, standard versus private, permissions in Microsoft Teams, and of course we'll demonstrate everything we've showed you, as well as allowing some time for question and answer. Now I'd like to just quickly introduce you to Jess Stewart. She's a senior project consultant here at Brennan IT, and she'll be taking you through Microsoft Teams today.
Thanks, Beck. So I'm going to start off with a bit of an overview of the modern workplace as it is in Microsoft 365 because Microsoft Teams is a really important part in this, and it's really sort of the starting off point within Microsoft 365. It integrates with a lot of different applications, and having an understanding of how it sits within that is really important for how you're going to use it. So what is a modern workplace? Well, essentially it's got 4 key pillars. It's cloud technology, which means you can access it from anywhere, work on any device. You get automatic software updates, improved reliability of service, and some advanced security and compliance features. The second key pillar is it's all about open, fast communication. So your online calls and meetings, instant messaging, chat-based workspaces, and social engagement. Thirdly, and this one's really important, it's about effective collaboration. So you get some, advanced document management features like version control, share links, real-time co-authoring. And you also get task management tools, both for your team and yourself as an individual. And importantly, you get a single source of truth for your team content. So this is what you are hoping to achieve with these team workspaces, is that everything in there is, going to be representative of everything that team is working on together. The fourth pillar is that it's personalized and flexible. So you can customize your individual settings. You can also tailor your team workspaces according to what that team needs to do. And you get some AI powered suggestions and insights. So the goal of the modern workplace is to drive digital cultural change, and to achieve this you need to understand the dynamics that need to be addressed at the individual, team, community and organisation level. Microsoft has designed the modern collaboration architecture, or MOCA, to help with this. So this framework shows how all the modern workplace tools integrate together to deliver a unified collaboration experience. And it also helps answer the question, which tool when, which is something that comes up a lot. As you can see in this diagram, there's a lot of different applications you get in Microsoft 365, and some of them do tend to have a bit of overlap in terms of functionality. Teams and Yammer is a good one, and you also get some overlaps with file storage applications, which I'll go through next. So there are 3 applications in Microsoft 365 that you typically use to interact with documents. OneDrive for Business, so this is for the individual. It's your personal files. They're private unless you share them. So you can use this storage location for ad hoc sharing with specific people. Maybe you've got, something to do with your career development and you're wanting to just share that with your manager only, then it belongs in OneDrive. But anything that relates to teamwork shouldn't be stored in OneDrive for Business. So that's where Teams comes along. Teams tends to be where all your team files are stored. It's for collaboration, your drafting process, and so on. SharePoint Online in the modern workplace becomes more of an organization file storage repository. So this is where your published files are, you know, intranet, extranet, for example, your formal document management systems, maybe you've got archive or record management process. So I will add a caveat here in that the files that you experience in Teams, they're actually stored in SharePoint. So it is kind of one and the same. It's just a question of, do you have a standalone SharePoint site or do you have a SharePoint site with a team? So those standalone sites, they tend to be your organization documents, and the Teams connected ones are where your team files are stored. So the key features of Microsoft Teams are really these four areas. You've got calls and meetings, private chat, team workspaces, which is what we're focusing on today, and app integrations. So there's a lot of functionality you get in one app, and you don't have to use it all straight away. You might want to start simple and then expand the functionality as you go. And generally, this is what we recommend as well, particularly around the team workspaces. So when you're rolling out Teams, it's also important to design your information architecture first and to plan for growth. And in order to do this, you need to understand how content in Teams is structured. So a team is essentially a collaboration space that brings together a group of people with a shared goal. A channel organizes the team's content around topics or work streams. Every team gets a general channel, and then you can create additional ones according to that team's needs. Within each channel, you have tabs. So this is where the content is. Each channel has a posts tab and a files tab, and you can't remove those. So the posts tab, that's the conversations, that data is stored in Teams. The files tab, that's stored in SharePoint. You can also have additional tabs, for example, you know, one that links to the shared OneNote notebook or to a plan for your task management stuff. So when you create a team, it creates a SharePoint team site that's shared with all team members. And when you create a channel, it creates a corresponding folder in the document library of that SharePoint site. So you don't usually see those top level folders unless you do go to that backend SharePoint site in the web browser. And it's not recommended to really play around or add content at that level because it's not visible through Teams. So those top level channel connected folders, when you go to the Files tab in Teams, you're seeing the contents of those folders. And then you can have, you know, additional subfolders within that as you go along. When you create a private channel, it actually creates a second SharePoint site that's only shared with the private channel's members. So standard channels, they're open to everyone in the team. Anything you post there is searchable by all team members, and you can have a maximum 200 channels in a team. Whereas private channels, they're for conversations and file sharing within a subset of that team. So stuff that shouldn't be open to all members, but doesn't really warrant a separate team. As I said, each private channel gets its own SharePoint site, and that's to ensure that the files there is actually restricted, and it also will inherit policies from the parent site. So it's sort of, if you're familiar with, I guess, older types and practices with SharePoint, it's more of a sub-site relationship, even though they are separate site collections. So you won't see the private channel SharePoint site in the SharePoint Admin Center. It's sort of hidden from that list there, but it does exist as a separate site, and it will inherit external sharing settings, you know, any sort of sensitivity labels you apply, retention policies, that kind of thing, from the parent site of the team that that private channel is a part of. There are some limitations with what you can do in private channels at the moment. So you can't use Planner or Forms, and that's important to consider before you create them. And you can have a maximum of 30 private channels in one team, and that's in addition to the 200 standard channels you have. So you could have a total of 230 channels all up. So these are some examples of teams that you could have. The first three are department-based teams. You've got one for IT, marketing, and HR. And then the fourth one is a product development team. So this is really designed to help break down those information silos between departments. So rather than having, a product development channel in the marketing team, you would have a marketing channel in the product development team and bring all those conversations and files and other content into the one place so that you can have a better understanding of what the business is doing as a whole rather than having it controlled within your single department. You can also have private channels here. So the budget, if that needs to be restricted but doesn't really warrant its own team just to discuss budgets and store those documents, that's a really good example of when you would use a private channel. And there's another example in the HR team as well for employee records. You might also notice that in the IT and marketing teams, there's a channel for projects. So this is one approach you can take. You can just store all your project stuff within the department channel, or you could take the approach where for each new project, you create a separate team for that. So there are pros and cons to each, no hard right or wrong. It's really, you need to take into consideration how you're going to be managing the life cycle of your content. And I guess what the permissions are going to be as well. Are you going to want to be able to add in external guests to collaborate on that project? If so, that's a good reason to create a separate team rather than keeping it within a department channel. So a question we often get asked is, should I create a new team? Does this warrant its own team? So we've created this diagram to help with that decision. So the first question you want to ask is there already a team with these people in it? If there isn't, that's when you would create a new team. If there is, the next question you want to ask is, does the work need to be kept private from the other people who are in that previously existing team? If the answer to that is yes, then the next question is, are there multiple distinct topics to discuss or work on? And you'd also want to factor in, do they want to use Planner to help with this work stream? So if the answer to that is yes, so it warrants multiple channels and the use of Planner, then you would create a new team. If the answer is no, like with that budget example, then you want to ask, do different policy settings need to be applied? So, maybe the existing team has external sharing off, but this private channel you want it to be on, in which case you wouldn't create a private channel, you would create a separate team. But if that doesn't matter, if it's going to have the exact same policies as the existing team, then you can just create a private channel in that same team. If the work doesn't need to be kept private, if there's already a channel for that topic, you just use that channel. Otherwise, it might be a good reason to create a new channel, and you want to also factor in the 200 channel limit in that channel structure design. So probably not a great idea to, create a channel whenever you have a new project, if there's going to be, more than 200 projects over 3 years, for example, because you're going to hit that limit and then you'll need to create a new team or delete old channels as well. So when you're structuring your teams or designing your information architecture, one of the key factors in that design is permissions. So, who needs access to what content. When you create a team, it creates what's called a Microsoft 365 group. So this is a security group in Azure AD that controls access to all of that team's shared resources. So the team workspace, the backend SharePoint site, any planner plans that are created there, the shared team notebook, the stream group where all your team meeting recordings are kept, and your Outlook shared inbox and shared calendar as well. It's important to note that you can't use nested security groups in these. So that means that you can't use one Active Directory security group to manage access to multiple teams. So it's one group to manage access to one team. This does make it a bit harder to automate the management of permissions. So as an IT administrator, you might be thinking, God, this is going to be a nightmare. It's going to take so long to grant access to new people. So really, Teams is all about decentralizing the control of technology. So it's no longer, tightly managed by IT. Business content owners need to step up and improve their IT literacy and take ownership for their content. And that gives them the flexibility to do what they need to do, what will work for their team. And so they really need to be the ones who are going to be granting access to their teams. You can automate permissions in Teams to a certain extent if you have Azure Active Directory Premium P1 licenses. So that will come with, say, an Office 365 E5 license. With that license, you can use dynamic membership rules to automate the permissions for particular teams. So this tends to only work for department-based teams. So you can do things like create a business rule where in the IT team, if anyone has their department in their user profile set to information technology or IT, they'll automatically be added into that team. So you'll be able to do that for some teams, but for the most part, if you've got project-based staff or cross-business unit teams, then you're not really going to be able to create any business rules to automate access there. So you really need to, educate business content owners, business users, how to manage their own areas, how to take ownership over that, and what the benefits of that will be for them as well. So with Teams, when you add people into a team, they'll automatically be added into that backend SharePoint site as well. So if you're familiar with SharePoint site permissions, you've got 3 standard security groups in each site. You've got owners, they have full control permissions, members have edit permissions, and site visitors have read permissions. So when a site's part of a team, the Microsoft 365 group owners or the team owners, they're one and the same, are added into the SharePoint site owners security group. And ditto for the members. The members are added into members. You can also use those standalone SharePoint security groups as you would normally. So that means you could add someone into site visitors, giving them read-only access to all of the documents in that backend SharePoint site without adding them into the team or any of the other shared team resources like planners and Stream and Outlook. So I wouldn't recommend doing this too much because it does make your security model a bit more complex, but just be aware of it. It is a possibility. You could also use it if you're wanting to have, for example, maybe a second document library on that backend SharePoint site that is shared with external people perhaps, whereas the main one that's connected to Teams is private for those team members only. So you can do things like that, but as I said, try to avoid that too much because particularly I think business owners, that will be a bit more advanced and it's harder for them to then take that ownership of that permission structure. So with private channel permissions, only a channel owner can add or remove members, and this means you can feasibly have, a team owner who's not a member of a private channel in their team, and they won't even see it. So it's important to sort of be aware of that and to make sure you don't get any orphaned private channels that nobody knows about. If you're not a member of a private channel, you won't even see it in the listen there. You won't know it exists. With a private channel, you can only add people into that who are already in the team. So you can only make channels more restrictive. You can't make them more open. So you couldn't have a team where you have one person who is added into one channel but doesn't see all of the others. It's more the other way around. It only gets more restrictive. So when a site is part of a private channel, the private channel owners and members are added into those security groups as direct users rather than using the Microsoft 365 security group structure to manage permissions there. The membership of the private channel is synced to those SharePoint security groups one way. So if you do mess around with the security on that private channel site, it'll be overridden by what's set up in Teams. So when you create a team, you'll get 3 options for the type of team it can be, and this is called the privacy settings. So you can create a private team, public team, and if you're a global admin, you also will see an org-wide team option. Private teams, this will be the kind of default one that you use, so they're not discoverable for people outside of that team. You need approval from a team owner to join it. Public teams are visible to everyone, and they can see that in the Teams gallery, which I'll show you in the demonstration at the end. So anyone can join these teams without approval from a team owner. In the Teams gallery, you'll see a Join Team button. You click that and you're a member of that team straight away. It's also important to note that everyone in your organization will have edit access to a public Teams SharePoint site, even if they haven't joined the teams yet. So that means you could be doing a search for some content in SharePoint, maybe a document, and if it matches any of the content in that public team, then it'll show up in your search results. So that's because the everyone except external users security group gets added into the SharePoint site members group. So important to understand that if you are wanting to keep the content more restricted. So if you're wanting to not necessarily make a private team super private, you want people able to join on their own, what you can do is a team owner can get a join code for that team, and you can just share that with whoever could possibly want to join that team in the future. So that's sort of another option rather than making it completely public. With org-wide teams, as I said, only global admins can create these, and you can have a maximum of 5 in your tenants. So if you don't see the org-wide option and you're a global admin, it's probably because you've reached your maximum 5 limit, or it could be that your tenant is an education tenant and this feature isn't available there yet. So with org-wide teams, the membership is automatically kept up to date with the user accounts that are in your Active Directory. So this will exclude any accounts that are blocked from sign-in or disabled, doesn't include guest users or service accounts, room or equipment accounts, or accounts that are backed by a shared mailbox. Guests also can't see or join any public teams. All right, so now I'm going to do a demonstration. So you can see here I'm in the Teams area of Teams, and I've got a list of my teams here. I've got the Agile project team, the marketing team, and all staff team here. So this is an org-wide team. You can also organize your teams list by hiding ones that you're not really active in at the moment. You can pin channels up the top that you're working in frequently. So this is all quite flexible, and I only see the teams here that I'm a member of. If I'm wanting to join a public team, I click down the bottom of the teams list here, join or create a team, and I can see any public teams and click join team to join that team. As I said before, if a team owner of a private team has shared a join code with you, you can enter that code here to join without the team owner needing to give you approval at that point. They've kind of de facto done that by sharing the join code with you. If you have permissions to create teams, you can also do that here. So if I go into the Agile project team here, I can see who the team members are. So I'm an owner, or if I was an owner, I would be able to add members here. I'm just a member, I'm using the Thor account. So I can add a member, and if I do that here, it won't add them directly. It will send a request to admin to add that person. So all team owners will be notified, and they can approve or reject those requests. You can see there's a private channel here as well, which is called private. And if I click on that there and go manage channel, I can then change the membership there. I'm an owner of this private channel because I created it. You can also add additional members and make members owners if you want as well. So in the general channel, you've got a couple of tabs along the top here. Posts, this is your conversations, really handy for having quick, fast conversations, sharing content, etc. One of the really great things about having conversations in this area as well is that it's really easy to have conversations about files that are stored in this team. So if I click the attach icon to my message and select Browse Teams and Channels, I automatically see the files that are within this channel area here. So it's really quick to quickly select it and share a link and start a conversation about that document there. Anyone else in the team can quickly click on it to then open it up and find more information about that document that I'm sharing. You can also add additional tabs up the top here. So I can see a list of lots of different apps here. The apps you can see will be controlled by IT admins with app permission policies. So if you're wanting to block third-party applications from being integrated with Teams because you're wanting to, keep the design a bit more simple to start with, you can do that as well, or just allow specific ones that are approved within your business. And, if you weren't using some Microsoft applications, for example, maybe you're not wanting to roll out Yammer yet, you can also block that one. So our third webinar on the 8th of October will go into more details about these other application integrations you can have within Teams. I'm really just going to focus on the standard integration you get with SharePoint today. So this Files tab here, I can see all the files that are related to this topic here, and you'll notice there's an Open in SharePoint button. So if I click on that, I'm taken to that backend SharePoint site. So it'll have the same name as the team, and I can see all of the contents of that general channel. But if I go up a level to the top of the document library, I can see all of those channel connected folders. So that matches the channels here, but note that there isn't a folder for the private channel. That's because it's got a separate SharePoint site. So again, you don't want to add any documents at this level here because they won't be visible in Teams. So avoid working at this level here, and also don't change any folder names because it will break the connection with that channel. So yeah, don't do that. So you can also use SharePoint, the backend SharePoint site, as you would a normal SharePoint site. So you can have pages. I've been using SharePoint News here. So you can see I've got a couple of news posts, and I've also used a connector in the general channel to automatically post that news post into the channel when it's been published for the first time. So you can control connectors up the top here, going to connectors, and same with tabs, this will respect the app permission policies. So if a particular app is blocked, I can't use it, I won't see it in the list here. So similarly, if you're using Microsoft lists, this is just SharePoint lists rebranding, and that list will get created on this backend SharePoint site as well. So now if I go into the private channel, if I go into the Files tab here, you can see I can also open that in SharePoint. But this takes me to a separate site. So the site here will have the naming convention, whatever the team name is, and then it'll be dash whatever the private channel name is. So this private channel I called private, so it'll be dash private. And it'll also have some text here to say this is a private channel, and it'll have a link to the parent team. So same with, the standard channels, the private channel will be, whatever the private channel name is, we'll have a folder in that top level document library. So I hope this has helped give you a better understanding of how Teams works with SharePoint. This is really important to understand, particularly when you're planning to roll out Teams and you're looking to structure your content and plan for growth as well. And yeah, if you're wanting to learn more about how other applications can be integrated with Teams, definitely check out our next webinar on the 8th of October. We'll cover more of that, particularly around, OneNote and tasks and lists. So I think we've got a bit of time for some questions now, if anyone wants me to demonstrate anything as well.
Yeah, so we've got one here. Can you embed a Teams post tab into a SharePoint page?
No, so that is one, I guess, reason why some people prefer to use Yammer, because you can embed Yammer conversations onto a SharePoint page, whereas with Teams, those conversations are kept within the Teams application. You can't see them anywhere else.
Another one, if you can't work on the back end of SharePoint, what would be the use of it? What if you use metadata?
So if you use metadata, there are some limitations to the experience of that in Teams at the moment. If you go to the Files tab, you'll be able to see any custom metadata columns you have there. But if you select a document, notice you can't edit properties at all. So you won't be able to edit that custom metadata unless you go to that backend SharePoint site, in which case you have the full document library experience. So Microsoft is working on developing this and improving it to give you the full SharePoint library experience through Teams. For example, previously you couldn't even see any custom metadata or change the view. But for now, if you are using custom metadata, you'll still need to work in that backend SharePoint site. So, you can edit any custom metadata columns you have here through the backend SharePoint site.
Great. We've got a question. What's your favorite connector to use?
Ooh, that's a good one. I actually don't find connectors as useful as I would hope they would be. I think because they don't necessarily alert anyone. Really, it'll just post something and then that channel will be bold, but you won't get an alert in your activity feed because it's not at mentioning you. So if you're wanting to use something for, that really requires urgent action, I don't find it, the best tool for that. But there are some handy ones, like an RSS feed, for example, or I've not used this one personally, but I've seen some examples of it. I think the Google Analytics summary reports, that can be quite useful. I think it's helpful if you're wanting to have conversations about that information that's being posted in there. So, if someone, for example, the SharePoint News one, if someone posted that in there and you wanted to have a conversation about it within the team, then you can start that straight away.
Great. We've got, how can I give access to guest users to post and read files in a team or channel?
Good question. So first of all, guest access for Teams needs to be turned on globally in your tenant for you to be able to do this. If you go to manage team or just go to add member, if you're an owner, all you have to do is paste that person's email address into here, and then you can add them as a guest into that team.
Great, we might just wait a few more minutes in case some more questions come through.
Yep. Cool. I would say as well with guest access, so at the moment when you turn it on globally, it'll mean that guests can be added into any team. So if you're wanting to control that and, restrict guests from being added into certain teams because they contain sensitive or confidential information, probably the best way to manage that is using sensitivity labels for containers. So you can, use that to control whether or not guests can be added into a team. So, for example, you can say with a confidential label, that won't allow guest access, but with, a public label, it will, for example.
Does anyone have any more questions? I'll keep it open for a few more minutes. How do you block third-party apps in Teams?
Good question. So you do that through the Teams Admin Center. So I think the account I'm logged in with now is an admin one, so I won't be able to show that. But if you go there, there's a section called App Permission Policies, and you can edit the org-wide permission policy for that to block access. And you can also create separate policies if you're wanting to allow it for, particular people. So you could have particular apps that are restricted, only certain users can add them, and other ones that are blocked for everyone. I'll see if I can show you the admin center.
Back on the guest users, unfortunately that's not enough. There is extra permissions required somewhere.
Sorry, what was that question?
In regarding to the guest users. Is there any extra permissions required from an admin perspective to allow guest users?
There's a whole checklist you need to go through to allow guest access in Teams. So there is in the Teams Admin Center, there's a guest access area where you can turn it on or off. But you'll see here there's a link to a checklist. So there are other prerequisites that need to be in place to allow this. This documentation here will walk you through all the steps. So yeah, there's a bunch of different other stuff. You also want to make sure that that backend SharePoint site of the team that you're adding guests into has external sharing on so they can actually see those files. So if I go into Teams app here and go into permission policies, this is where I can control who can add what apps into Teams. So if I click into the global or by default one, I can see it's allowing all apps, whether they're Microsoft third party or custom ones. But you can also create additional ones that are only Microsoft apps, blocking all third party apps, or you can say allow specific apps and block all others. So you can search and select an approved app, in which case users will be able to add that in. I can see there was a question, can guests see historical information from that team posted before they were added? So the answer to that is yes. So regardless of whether you're a guest or an internal team member, when you get added into a team, you see all of the conversation history, get access to all of the files. So that's really useful if you've got, a new team member coming on board. They can then, rather than having to forward on a million emails to them, they can see all of that conversation history relating to that topic and get up to speed much faster.
If I link a doc from one channel to another, does it create another copy of the doc in the second channel?
No. So when you, say if I was having a conversation about a document in the backlog channel, and that one's not been activated yet. Anyway, if I go to attach a channel, attach a file, I can select from another channel. It's just using a share link, so it's not creating a duplicate copy of that file. It's just a link to that file. So if I select project requirements, at mention Tony Stark, say, please review. So this is just a link that's, kind of a bit visual. So you can see it's got the file path there. It's in this project team in the general channel. And if I click on it, it's going to open up that document. So regardless of whether you have or use that share link in the channel where that file is actually stored or in another channel, it's not going to create duplicate copies. These share links, they're just the file path. So it's just, it's not a copy, it's a link, yeah.
as well. Can post feed be exported, for example, if a team site was made inactive and the content needed to be stored and accessed elsewhere?
Yeah, so that isn't really great at the moment. There are some limitations with the Microsoft API around, restoring and migrating channel conversations. So if you're using, a third-party backup tool like AvePoint, for example, if you're wanting to, maybe someone accidentally deleted a team and the 30-day soft delete period had finished, if you restore it, the channel conversations can only be restored in like an HTML file. Because of the Microsoft API limitations, you can't restore them as they originally appeared like this. So same goes with migrating stuff. It's not great at the moment, but Microsoft are working on improving that.
Yeah, questions, and that comes to the end of our webinar number 2 series. If you do have any questions that you may think of after watching the recording, you can send us through an email and we'll happily answer these questions for you. Thank you all for attending, and we hope you found it useful.